The summer of 1912 should have been peaceful in Villisca, Iowa, a small Midwestern town where neighbors left their doors unlocked and everyone knew one another. But on the morning of June 10, 1912, Villisca awoke to horror. 8 people, 6 children and 2 adults, were found brutally murdered inside the Moore family home. Each had been struck with an axe, their faces unrecognizable. It became one of America's most infamous unsolved crimes, a mystery that continues to haunt historians, investigators, and paranormal seekers alike. Part 1. Villisca in 1912. In 1912, Villisca was a farming town of about 2,500 people. Its economy was tied to railroads, livestock, and crops. Life was simple. Families attended church, children played freely, and the community revolved around social gatherings. The Moore family, among the most respected in town, lived in a modest 2-story home near the railroad tracks. Josiah B. Moore, Joe, a successful businessman in farm equipment. Sarah Moore, his wife, active in church and women's groups. Herman, 11. Catherine, 10. Boyd, 7. Paul, 5. Their 4 children. The Moores were beloved. Their church involvement made them a central part of town life. No one could have predicted they would soon become the victims of Iowa's darkest crime. Part 2, June 9, 1912, the day before. On Sunday, June 9, the Moore family attended church for Children's Day, a special service where young members performed. 2 neighbor girls, Ina, 8, and Lena Stillinger, 12, close friends of Catherine Moore, asked permission to spend the night at the Moore house after the program. Their parents agreed. The house that night was full of children, laughter, and tired energy after a long day. By 10 p.m., the Moores and Stillinger girls were asleep. By morning, they would all be dead. Part 3. The killer enters. At some point between midnight and 2 a.m., an intruder entered the Moore home. Theories vary. Some believe the killer was already hiding inside before the family returned from church. Others think the person slipped in quietly after the house went dark. Evidence suggests the murderer carried an oil lamp, with the glass chimney removed and the wick turned low, creating a dim, controlled light. The killer picked up an axe belonging to Josiah Moore, which had been left in the backyard. The murders then began. Part 4. The brutal slaughter. The killer first entered the upstairs bedroom where Josiah and Sarah Moore slept. Josiah was struck multiple times in the head, the axe slicing deep. His face was unrecognizable. Sarah was next, her head smashed by the blunt end of the axe. The killer then moved to the children's rooms. Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul were slaughtered in their beds. Finally, the killer descended the stairs to the Stillinger sisters' room. Ina was struck in her sleep. Lena, however, may have awoken. Her body suggested she tried to defend herself. All 8 were dead within an hour. Part 5. Strange rituals. The crime scene revealed chilling details. All mirrors in the house were covered with cloth. All victims' faces were covered with sheets or clothing. An uneaten plate of food was left on the table. A slab of bacon was left in the kitchen, wrapped in cloth, as if part of some ritual. The killer had remained in the house for hours after the murders, calmly covering mirrors, eating food, and lingering. It was as if the murders were not just a crime, but a grotesque ritual. Part 6. Discovery of the bodies. On June 10, 1912, neighbor Mary Peckham grew worried when the Moores didn't appear for morning chores. By 8 a.m., she knocked on the door. No answer. She tried to enter, but the house was locked. She called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore, who arrived with a key. When Ross entered, he found the first 2 bodies, the Stillinger girls. He rushed out, shouting, "Something terrible has happened. Call the sheriff." Word spread fast. Soon, dozens gathered outside the Moore home, horrified by whispers of the massacre. Part 7. The scene of horror. Sheriff Hank Horton arrived. What he saw shocked him. The blood was everywhere. The bodies were still in their beds. The axe was found in the guest room, leaning against a wall, bloodied. Doctors estimated the murders occurred after midnight. But crucial evidence was contaminated. Townsfolk entered the house, trampling through rooms before police secured the scene. The biggest murder investigation in Iowa history had begun. Part 8. The investigation begins. Sheriff Hank Horton had never dealt with a crime like this. In 1912, forensic science was primitive. There were no fingerprint databases, no DNA tests, no advanced crime labs. Detectives relied on witness testimony, motive, and circumstantial evidence. The brutality of the crime shocked not only Villisca but the entire nation. Newspapers across America ran headlines about the Villisca Axe Murders. But finding the killer proved nearly impossible. Part 9. Prime Suspects. Over the years, several suspects emerged. Each had motive, opportunity, or strange behavior that drew suspicion. 1. Frank Jones. Josiah Moore once worked for Frank Jones, a wealthy Villisca businessman. But Josiah left to start his own competing business, taking key clients with him. Rumors swirled of bitter rivalry. Some even whispered that Josiah had an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law. Could Jones have hired someone to kill Moore? Many believed so, but no evidence tied him directly. 2. Reverend George Kelly. The most infamous suspect was Reverend George Kelly, a traveling preacher. Kelly was a peculiar man. Small, nervous, eccentric. He attended the children's day service the Moores had been part of. The next day, he left town abruptly. Later, he wrote disturbing letters about the murders. In 1917, Kelly confessed to the killings after hours of police interrogation. But he recanted, claiming coercion. A jury acquitted him, leaving doubt forever. 3. Paul Mueller, the serial killer theory. A theory advanced in later decades suggests a German immigrant named Paul Mueller may have been responsible. Author Bill James argued that Mueller committed a series of axe murders across the Midwest between 1898 and 1912. The Villisca murders matched his suspected pattern. Whole families, use of an axe, mirrors covered, lingering after the crime. If true, Villisca was part of a larger serial spree. 4. Random drifters. At the time, transient workers and hobos frequently passed through railroad towns like Villisca. Some theorized the murders were committed by a drifter who hopped on a train and vanished. But without evidence, the theory remains speculation. Part 10. Theories about the murders. Theories abound. More than a century later, no one knows the truth. Ritualistic killing. The covering of mirrors and faces suggested ritual. Some theorized the killer was mentally ill, compelled by superstition. Revenge or feud. If Frank Jones was behind it, the murders may have been revenge against Josiah Moore. Serial killer pattern. The Axeman theory ties Villisca to similar murders in Kansas, Illinois, and Colorado. Crime of opportunity. Perhaps the killer simply saw the family asleep, seized the axe, and acted out of impulse. Part 11. The trials. The only man ever brought to trial was Reverend George Kelly. In 1917, 5 years after the murders, he was charged with the killings. The case was sensational. Prosecutors pointed to his strange behavior, his obsession with the case, and his confession. But the defense argued his confession was false, coerced by relentless questioning. The first trial ended in a hung jury. The second acquitted him entirely. No one else was ever charged. Part 12. Villisca after the murders. The town was never the same. Fear gripped Villisca. Doors once left unlocked were now bolted at night. Families slept with weapons nearby. The murders divided the community. Accusations flew. Some supported the Jones theory, others believed Kelly did it. But as years passed with no resolution, the crime became legend. Part 13. The House of Horror. The Moore house where the murders occurred still stands. For decades, it was just another house in town, but in the late 20th century, it was restored to its 1912 state. Now, it operates as a museum and paranormal attraction. Visitors claim to feel cold spots, hear whispers, and see shadowy figures. Paranormal investigators call it one of America's most haunted houses. Part 14. Paranormal Encounters. Ghost hunters and television shows like Ghost Adventures have investigated the Moore house. Some claim children's laughter echoes through empty rooms. Lamps flicker without power. A man's shadow lingers near the parents' bedroom. EVP, electronic voice phenomena. Recordings capture whispers. Skeptics dismiss this as imagination, but believers argue the trauma of 1912 left a permanent scar on the home. Part 15. Cultural Legacy. The Villisca Axe Murders have inspired books, including The Man from the Train by Bill James, documentaries, such as Villisca, Living with a Mystery, movies, and countless true crime podcasts. The case is often compared to Lizzie Borden and the Axemen of New Orleans, unsolved killings that linger in American folklore. Part 16. Why it still haunts us. Why does the Villisca case still terrify us more than a century later? Because it shattered the illusion of safety. This wasn't a murder in a city alley or a crime of passion. It was a slaughter of an entire family, in their beds, in their home, in a quiet town. If it could happen in Villisca, it could happen anywhere. Part 17. Conclusion. On the night of June 9th to 10th, 1912, 8 lives were stolen by an unknown hand. The killer left behind horror, mystery, and a story that has echoed for more than 100 years. The Villisca Axe Murders remain unsolved, but the memory of that night ensures Villisca will forever be remembered, not as a peaceful town, but as the site of America's most haunting nightmare.